is when we drop off on things like our sleep hygiene or our regular movement or good nutrition, we can fall back into those old patterns, and we can also start to feel that we become quite childlike in our behavior because we are no longer mindful or conscious of our emotional intelligence. Hello and welcome back. Now, just before we get started, if you're watching this on the Total Somatics YouTube channel, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and press the notification bell. So whenever I release an episode, you find out very quickly. And also, you probably know by now, but if you are new to these podcast episodes, I just want to share with you that I have a TEDx talk that was released several months ago. And if you go to YouTube and you type in the search bar TEDx Heidi Hadley, it will bring up my TEDx talk on the subject of pandiculation. So please do check that out and give me a thumbs up and comments in the messages below, because I'd love to see your comments and your takeaway points, and also share it with anyone that you know it will resonate with. Okay, so first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for your kind words and your feedback. I've had some lovely comments from my free 1 hour session that I've just recently held with the Shift Network. So this is now giving people the opportunity, because the replay has been going out over this weekend, but it gives people the opportunity now to come in and sign up for my 7-week course with the Shift Network. And so my 7-week course are going to cover the subjects of neuroplasticity, pain management, habits, mindset, mindfulness, and clinical somatic movement. So I'm combining many of the subjects that I work with in clinic and that I also have qualifications in and continue to do teaching and training, either for practitioners as well as for the general public. So please come along. I've designed this whole 7 weeks, and there's lots of deepening practices that you can take away and follow through after we've had our sessions together. And I know that it's the content that I've created. I'm so pleased with that content. I know that you're going to take so many life skills and techniques away. So if you're interested, I will leave all the details in the show notes below this episode. However, again, if you're driving or walking the dog and you haven't got that chance at the moment to do that, you can still go to Google and type in the Shift Network Heidi Hadley, and it will bring up my 7-week course. And then I'll look forward to connecting with you either live or you can watch the replays. Again, wherever you live in the world, you'll have the opportunity to. And also we can stay connected with questions throughout the whole 7 weeks together. Okay, so just before we go, one more special announcement, which I mentioned last time, that I'll share with you. And that is that if the 7-week course is not something that floats your boat at this point, there is the opportunity to join the Total Somatics online membership. So the doors are currently open. So if you want to find out a little bit more about the Total Somatics online membership, go to totalsomatics.com, click on the Join Now page, and you'll see all the details there. And it would be wonderful to welcome you into the global community with all these beautiful friends around the world. Okay, so what I want to share with you today, and it's kind of because I was writing the modules for this 7-week course, it made me think, because this time of the year, as we're towards the end of January, it can be a really challenging time because, again, Christmas and New Year can be very challenging times for people. And so because of what's happened over those times over the Christmas and New Year period, it can have a lag effect and bring about different feelings and emotions as we get towards the end of January. But if you're not listening to this at the end of January, it can apply any time of the year. But I think just because I was thinking of, you know, we all have things we can recall in the past with ourselves or with family and friends, that I thought, you know, there is a pattern that you see things like this happen. And I've, you know, over 20 odd years now, I've been working in clinical practice, and wherever you live in the world, there are patterns. You see it everywhere. And so you see similar conversations, similar scenarios. It doesn't matter if it was the UK or here in Australia, people have those same patterns, and you see that happening again at the end of January. And so what I want us to consider today is how we can be more curious and non-judgmental of our thoughts and our emotions. Because I want us to notice, are we judgmental also about other people? Do we find that we're finding fault with them, or we try and create a little bit of friction, or we're trying to, we may only know a fraction about their life, and a fraction about them as a person, but we can build up our own judgment of that individual through our lens, and yet we don't know all of the story. We don't know what drives that person. We don't really know them at all, but we think we know. We think we're right, or we may think we're right in different settings. But I want us to stand back and consider, can we be less judgmental, more curious? Because the other thing I mentioned previously as well is that when we are fault finding with other people, it's often because we're unhappy in our own situation. So we're trying to deflect from our own feelings. But what it does do eventually is it just drags us down. We feel really exhausted. Our energy is depleted because we are using negative energy in a situation that's not going to build us up. So want us to consider how we can weave in last week's episode where we talked about when we notice that our self-care is dropping off, and weaving that into this week's subject where we want to talk about what we can do to stay more curious and non-judgmental. When we do that, we use different portions of our brain, and those parts of our brain are more for emotional intelligence, they're for focus, awareness, concentration, executive functioning. So we really do enhance our emotional intelligence and well-being. Whereas when we go into that judgmentalness, we fall back in to that immaturity emotionally, which kind of takes us back to the childhood immaturity that we can weave. Because I'm going to develop it here, but we've all got our inner child. We've all got like an 8-year-old inside of us. And sometimes what we find is when we drop off on things like our sleep hygiene or our regular movement or good nutrition, we can fall back into those old patterns. And we can also start to feel that we become quite childlike in our behavior because we are no longer mindful or conscious of our emotional intelligence. So that's what I want to consider today, is how when we're not feeling great, and it could be this time of the year, that instead of us trying to find fault with other people, that we actually just pull back, be curious, be non-judgmental, and just take really good care of ourselves. Because I'm going to ask you this question here. Can you remember times when you felt yourself really grounded and really centered? And do you remember how that felt? Can you recall how you felt at that time? Maybe feel calmness inside. You weren't ruminating and creating stories, embellishing these ideas or a memory that you had and just making it bigger than it actually was. It can be really challenging to rein in this because it can be a learned behavior. But what I'd encourage you to do is, could you consider, remember I talked about we've all got an 8-year-old inside of us. We've all got that inner child. There's something from our childhood that all of us have got it that was not kind of resolved. Sometimes we're carrying that into adulthood. So, you'll see some adults and they might be stroppy and give you the silent treatment and be moody. But can you see that that's the 8-year-old? What do the 8-year-olds do when they can't manage things or they don't get their own way? They are slamming doors and they're stroppy and they're puffing and walking off in different places. It could be that that person goes into rages and they lose their temper quickly. And that's like a child having those temper tantrums. We're not responsible for what other people are doing, but we need to look what are our little things that we need to manage. Because I'd like you to imagine that when you start feeling like that self-care is dropping off, you're not sleeping enough, your nutrition's dropped off, start bringing those crucial steps back in. And then could you imagine that you're talking to a younger version of yourself, maybe an 8-year-old, whatever age you can picture in your mind. And in that, I'd like you to consider, if you were talking to your younger self, how would you talk? How would you embrace that little person of you? Would you hug them, hold their shoulder, look them straight in the eye and say, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Or you're safe. You don't need to worry. What would you say? That would you find that your words would be gentle, very kind, very compassionate? Would you listen to the concerns of that younger version of you with curiosity, no judgment? Just listening and then asking relevant questions and providing that support where necessary. You see, I encourage us to do that because when we put it through the lens of, can we see our little self in us, it means that we talk to ourselves differently. It's so common to hear people really running themselves down, really quite, derogatory in their own expressions and whatever they do. And as that is a reflection of their subconscious. So it could be that it's a learned behavior, that's how we've talked to ourselves for years, for whatever reason. But I'd like you to pull back all the stories that have been happening in your life over the time and notice that when you go back into these patterns where you feel really low, really flat, whatever it is for you, because I know mine, you know yours, could we go back to pretending, or not pretending, we imagine we are talking to a younger version of ourselves. I always think of a little 8-year-old with little pink tails and a little soccer ball or football under my arm. And just look and see how you would talk to that little self of yours. Because I want you to now consider that mode. Could you now switch it to talk to yourself now in the present as well? Again, we've all got that inner child. There's always something in us that's needing that reassurance, that's craving and needing that support. So whatever the challenge is, could we bring that back to ourselves and talk to ourselves? Either we might talk out verbally or internally. And what that's starting to do is shift what could be a self-critical, judgmental mindset or narrative we have here to more of a caring, kind, compassionate dialogue that we have in here. So you see, when we talk to ourselves kindly, we are building this safe, nurturing environment that our nervous system starts to feel regulated. And that could be something that we never had when we were little. It could be something that we know we can bring in now because we are the adult in the room. We are in control of the situation. And we now can reassure that part of us that was not too confident in the past that it's safe now. The environment is safe. We're going to be okay. And so this avoids us being self-critical, and it also allows us to take more reign over allowing those thoughts and internal words to become more kind, more nurturing. It is something we need to work on a lot, but I'd encourage you to start from today if you can. Because we all deal with challenging seasons in our life. And I've always said it before, they often come when you least expect it. And what we can do is with our own self-talk and addressing that little person inside of us, we can start to self-regulate and help to create this nice, stable or regulated nervous system. So we have a greater capacity to deal with the fluctuations in stress, and the challenges can be incredibly chaotic. So we can't do much about those challenges, but we can give ourselves greater bandwidth or capacity for our nervous system to deal with this situation. And when we have a shift in our internal narrative of more of a nurturing, caring, compassionate way we speak to ourselves, that makes such a difference to feeling safe and nurtured from within. So my big brother, I know he listens to some of my episodes, so hopefully he hears this one. My big brother in the past has said things to me like, this time will pass. And I often say that to myself, this time will pass. There are times that can be really, really stressful, but they will pass. And what often happens is that although we may have figurative scars emotionally, mentally, physically, energetically, what we can always do is find a life lesson in them. And that life lesson could be that it's heightened and increased our skills of empathy and compassion and kindness. And I don't know about you, but when you've been through a fair few things in your life, you are less judgmental with people because you know what? You know there's more to life than what people perceive. Like there isn't a black and white. There's a lot of in between. And so it allows you to give more compassion and understanding. And because I work in a clinical setting and I see so many people come in with this big smile in the clinic, in the reception, then they come into my room and they know it's a safe place where they can decompress. For me, I often think, when I'm walking around in the community and I'm seeing people smiling, you realize how everybody puts on a bit of a public smile and a face. But underneath, people have all got something that they're concerned and they're worried about. And so that's why when we are kind and we're non-judgmental and we're curious and we're genuinely interested in people and connecting with people, then we don't realize how much that bit of our life can have an impact on somebody else who might be smiling to the world, but can have a broken heart, very crushed spirit, whatever it is. Our little bit in the community can make such a big difference to people. We may never know. But I've often said when we smile at people, it's like a hug from afar. You just recognize somebody, you say hello, and that can mean a lot to people because it's how it lands on their nervous system. Again, talking about that little 8-year-old inside of us, just a smile and an acknowledgement when you're walking along the footpath. It could be enough for that little person, that little 8-year-old inside, to just be acknowledged. Maybe it was something that wasn't the case when they were younger. So can you see how it's all about social engagement? It's all about connecting with people. And this sort of thing is really what builds not only builds our capacity and strength within our nervous system, but as a community, it really has that spreading, that scattering effect everywhere. So yeah, we can learn a lot from these sorts of things. But what I would encourage you to consider today is think about that younger version of you, whatever age you want to stick with. For me, it's an 8-year-old. But how would you speak to that little person, that little you? Consider that. Can we pull that back and go back to that nurturing? And again, holding. If you need to, you can self-soothe by just holding. If you're listening to this just through audio and not visually, I've got my arms crossed and I'm just sort of stroking and smoothing my arms. It could be that I just hold my belly or hold my chest and just tap and breathe into these areas. And the reason I say that for as well is it's a bit like, you know, when children are little and you kind of just rub their stomach to kind of ease and calm them down. Well, I mean, that's not going to get rid of a sore belly, but what it does is, because we are more sensory than motor as individuals, that is a self-soothing, nurturing technique. So again, consider what we can do to really help regulate our nervous system, talk to ourselves like we were younger, with that compassionate, kind, empathetic, non-judgmental, curious manner. And then also just holding, you know, or rubbing or whatever you want to do, hold different areas so that we come back out of our head into our body. And it's a form of just embracing and self-soothing. It's all part of nurturing. It's really, really important that we do that, especially when we feel low, when we feel very stressed. So again, address the needs of your inner child, you know, see what it is, how you want to talk to that person, how you want to talk to yourself, and how you can soothe that emotional as well as the physical turmoil that you may be feeling. But again, coming right back to the beginning of when you start going and spiraling into those default patterns, what little steps have you maybe dropped off? Sleep hygiene. Are you getting enough sleep? Have you started consuming negative, toxic TV shows or channels or whatever it is you watch? Maybe it's the same with reading material, or maybe music. If it's quite depressing music, that can really drop our energy down too. Maybe we've dropped off on our nutrition. Maybe we're having more stimulants again, like sugar and caffeine. And maybe it's that we're just not moving our body. We haven't got our daily somatic movement practice. We haven't got our mindful practice, our mindset in that sort of zone. Instead of that, we've let all that drop off. Then we start feeling like we're going back into our default patterns. And that's when those negative narratives can kick off. So can you see today, there's a bit of a journey that we're taking through this, but I wanted to share it with you purely for the fact that as I said, I've seen many people over the years, and this is something that starts to happen, is that we have all this excitement over the Christmas, New Year, and things can drop off. People can feel quite flat in, say, the Northern Hemisphere. It's pretty dark. It can really get people down. But also other dynamics, family dynamics, can impact how people feel towards the end of January. But as I said, this information is applicable any time of the year. So whenever you pick this up, or if you hear this now, and then you feel like you want to go back to this episode, it's applicable any time of the year. But all I'd say is be kind to yourself, non-judgmental, curious, like we do with children. Whenever a child says anything to us, we want to be curious and speak to them as if to say, that's really interesting. Why is that the case? And then bring it all out. And that's how we want to be for ourselves. At the end of the day, we've got to take really good care of ourselves. And so that's why I encourage you this week and from now on, just to be kinder, more compassionate with yourself if you found that you're starting to talk to yourself in a bit of a critical way. And also think of the community. That smile from afar is like a big, chunky, juicy hug, and it just really connects everybody together. So anyway, I'm going to head off now, and I'm going to love you and I'm going to leave you. And please let me know your comments below. It's just really something I'm quite passionate about, is this subject, just because of things that I've seen over the years, worked with people in domestic violence, refugees and stuff like that. So I'm really, really quite interested in this subject and how we can really take good care of ourselves. So I will love you and leave you, and I will see you next time. All my love and my very best wishes. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and also forward this on to somebody you know will benefit. To learn more about pain relief, plus how to improve your health and well-being, go to totalsomatics.com. Until next time, take care.